Coming up next on Words and Numbers, the food pyramid,
how to become a millionaire,
see a weaver,
and collapse of a regime.
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world?
Somebody sent me an article from AOL. This is AOL.com, which
is AOL
of course
still a thing?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a thing, but apparently it still has articles that it posts. But this is one that was, at least the idea was making the rounds about a year ago. It pops up every once in a while. And it says the average worker would need to save for 52 years to claw their way out of the middle class and be classified as wealthy.
That's a bunch of red-hot nonsense.
Well, it is nonsense. People pass this kind of thing around saying, look, here's proof that, it's stagnation. You're just stuck. And if you're born into the middle class, that's the way it's going to be. And in fact, there are similar things, something about if you saved all of your money from the time that the universe first came into existence, you still wouldn't have as much money as Elon Musk, right?
It's only 6,000 years now, right?
Even if it were, you'd still have more than Elon Musk. Because what both of these articles are ignoring is the interest rate on savings.
Yeah, compounding interest. It's miraculous.
Yeah, look, if you just put the money under your mattress, yeah, this is right. You'd have to save for 52 years, but the whole point of a financial system is to enable those who don't have the money now to borrow from those who do have the money now, and everybody's better off, and interest is the price you pay for that. And of course, if you're going to ignore it, well, all right, you got to save for 52 years. But anyway, nonetheless, I pulled some numbers. I wanted to know how much would the average American have to save? Forget about being classified as wealthy, which is actually a somewhat lower bar. I'm asking the question, how much would you need to save to end up with $1 million by the time you retired? So in all these cases, I'm going to talk about someone who begins saving at age 22. So, right after you get out of college or you get yourself established out of high school, whatever it is, age 22 to age 67, right? Now, let's look at the median American, the guy in the middle. And, by the way, all the numbers I'm going to quote here are adjusted for inflation. So when I say $1 million, I mean $1 million as we understand it today. It's purchasing power I'm talking about here. Take the median, the guy in the middle, not the average, the guy in the middle, American. And over the course of his career, he's going to earn a bunch of money. And let's suppose he saves at 5% above inflation, which would be like, if inflation's running 3%, that would be like 8% interest, which is not at all unreasonable. I mean, that's 8% interest is a mix of stocks and bonds. Someone who's 22 shouldn't be in bonds at all. You should be entirely stocks, and there you're talking, maybe 10% or more above inflation. But let's suppose we're just 5% above inflation, so that's rather conservative. This person would have to save 10% of his wages, 10% every paycheck. And by the time he retires, he's got $1.6 million in the bank. And
is that take home or gross?
Very good. He saves 10% of his gross. He ends up with 1.6 million. If he saves 10% of his take home, he ends up with 1.2 million.
Pretty good either way.
Yeah. And so, and people can argue about, well, in today's climate, it's, really hard to save 10%. Okay, fine, but it's not impossible. And what's the payoff? You retire a millionaire.
It's my firm belief that 10% can be cut out of almost everything.
Yeah, you would think so. And I pushed the matter. I said, so what about, because here when I talk about the median American when you're in the low to mid 20s, you're earning the median American about 43,000 gross, and it goes up as you progress through your career. But let's suppose instead we're talking about someone who is in the bottom 20%. The bottom 20%, the average person there is earning 16,000 gross. And let's suppose this person stays in the 20% his entire career. So he's earning 16,000 all the way through, from age 22 all the way to age 67. If he saves 10%, let me put the interest rate back so we're comparing apples to apples. If he saves 10%, he retires with over $250,000 in the bank. Now, it's not the million, but it's $250,000 on a bottom 20% income. So even poor Americans can, and if he jacks up his interest rate, if he leans more toward equities, he can get that up to $500,000. If he can save a little bit more, let's say 12%, 13%, he can get up to $650,000, $700,000. So he's starting to get close to $750,000. Is it difficult? Sure, it's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible.
Well, that runs counter to a lot of narratives, so I don't suspect you're going to get a lot of traction with this argument.
No, people push back. Actually, James, who doesn't push back? It's people who are approaching retirement, who look back and say, if I'd only saved 10%. It's the young people who say, well, no, that can't work and I can't afford 10%. I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying this is what the numbers say.
Also, and don't forget that the people who do save 10% and who do get between $1.2 and $1.6 million are also going to be eligible for Social Security.
Right. Yes. Right. And so Social Security's on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can be impressive, but as usual, it takes habituation. It's not home runs, it's singles.
Yeah, that's right. But time after time, yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit today in the credit where it's due department. We've been very critical, or at least I have. Now that I think about it, I don't think you've said anything one way or the other. I've been very critical of RFK Jr. with his Make America Healthy Again nonsense and, the anti-vax business and the whole bit. But the FDA, I think today, or might have been yesterday as we record, released the new food pyramid. And you would have to be, I think, so brazenly resistant to evidence to say that the previous food pyramid did any good at all, that I don't think I could even talk to you.
It was the second one, right? Because when we were kids, there was a different one still.
Right. And let's just say the sugar industry got a hold of things.
What, the current one?
No.
Or the previous one?
No. Okay. The sugar industry took a big hit with this new one. And when I say sugar, it's not just sugar, right? It's refined foods, it's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are sugars. And a lot of people still, for whatever reason, can't figure that out. But what do we see on the new food pyramid? It's a lot of meats, a lot of dairy, and very little by way of processed grains. And do I think this is going to make a difference in the eating habits of the average American? Probably not, but it'll filter in, I think, at some level. And as it does, dare I say it, we are likely to become healthier.
So do you know who owns the FDA? What part of government?
Yeah, it's the Department of Agriculture.
Okay, that's the one that owned the original. And here's the thing, when the food pyramid first came out, it's the government saying, here are things you should eat. And everybody thought, well, this must be the FDA or something like it. The goal is to make us healthy. Department of Agriculture is not founded to make us healthy. It's founded to support American agriculture.
Right, to make farmers wealthy.
Yeah, and so the original food pyramid was eat like 24 helpings of grains or whatever it was.
Yeah, and when you think about it, Ant, when you and I were children, dinner was always the exact same animal, right? It was a meat, a vegetable, and a starch.
Right.
And that was that. And the idea that you would snack your way through a day was verboten, right?
Oh, no.
You'll spoil your dinner, was what my mother used to say.
Well, this is the weird thing, as you and I used to visit high schools, it always took me aback when the teachers would tell the students something about they can have their snacks now or late. Snacks were something kindergartners did.
Right, and they would have lunch at like 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
But anyway, the idea that you should be eating a bevy of small meals every day that each contain a bunch of carbohydrates, it made everybody who ate that diet fat.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of great reasons for that. I'll leave it to the listeners to go ferret out that sort of thing if they're interested. What I'm interested in seeing is what effect this will have on things like school lunches, right? Do mothers take this to heart in any way? Because they did seem to take to heart the last food pyramid.
Right.
Maybe it'll happen again. So credit where it's due. I think whatever role Robert F. Kennedy played here was a good role, and I'm glad to see it.
I just hope people pay attention. I think, as much as I am against the government intruding in our lives, I think there are some things it does well, and it's good that it does them. And one of them is contributing to health. And I don't mean from health insurance or anything like that, but, stuff that CDC has done, the research, the public awareness. Up until COVID, I think CDC, that largely, my gut reaction is, largely CDC was a well-respected government entity. Lost a lot of that, and I think that splashed on to other parts of the government as well.
Sure. And look, I think government as data aggregator is not such a bad thing. Yeah. Government as enforcer of certain things is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So, somewhere you've got to find the right ground. And notice I didn't say the middle ground. I don't think the middle ground is the right ground. Mm-hmm. I think providing information and stepping off and letting people live their lives as they see fit, probably the right answer. Probably. Of course, it's the right answer.
We're happy to announce that civil members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a members-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, philosophy, and economics. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. You can also submit your questions for us at wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to Civil at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. When you log into civil.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series as well as the collection of all our episodes of Words and Numbers and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to Civil for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription.
That brings us, Ant, to the foolishness of the week. And I suspect that the people I'm about to bring up are going to be people that we talk about nearly endlessly. And all of the people who are out there who are convinced we're Trump shills or anti-Trump shills are going to love this, because I want to bring us, Ant, for the first time to New York City.
And its new mayor.
And it's brand spanking new mayor. But it's not the mayor I want to talk about. It's one of the idiots that he's hired, a woman named Sia Weaver. And she is in charge of making rents affordable. I hesitate to use the word again because they were never affordable in New York City in the first place. But she's a 37-year-old woman who has referred to home ownership as, quote, a weapon of white supremacy.
Oh, my God.
A weapon of white supremacy.
Home ownership.
Apparently only white people own homes. But I digress, because upon just a tiny, and I mean the tiniest bit of digging, I found out that her mother owns a $1.6 million home. So I dare say what we're seeing here in New York City is white guilt coming home to roost. What could possibly go wrong?
I don't know what to do with that. I could see, I don't agree with the argument, but I could see someone formulating an argument that owning a apartment building that you rent out is somehow white supremacy. But owning a home?
Yeah, she was pressed on this, and people asked her about the $1.6 million home, and she kind of burst into tears and ran back inside.
You're kidding me. Did it
I wish I were.
occur to her that someone was going to find that information in about 30 seconds?
Apparently not. And she is the director, just to be precise, of the Office to Protect Tenants. In other news,
Wow.
There is an Office to Protect Tenants.
Right, yeah. And of course, it's not going to occur to anybody there. They're going to do all the things that they do, and they will probably make the situation worse because it hasn't occurred to any of them that they're part of the problem.
Well, free child care through age 5 is also now a thing in New York City. So they're hitting the ground running. I look forward to watching the implosion that will be the city of New York. But speaking of implosions, we've got a bigger thing to talk about.
Before we leave that, I need to explain for listeners who might want some more detail. When I say that they're the problem, New York has lived under rent control of various forms for a long time, and rent control is one of those things like the unsurprisingly like the minimum wage for all the same economic reasons that you think you're doing a good thing of saying, well, rent is not going to rise above a certain level, when in fact what you're doing is removing the incentive for people who own land and buildings to provide more housing.
And so it's worse than that. It's worse than that because what you're saying is, yes, your rent won't rise above this level, but the rents of other people will rise far above this level to make back the money that the landlord loses on the rent control.
Right.
And
right.
It becomes a very similar argument to the minimum wage problem.
Yep.
Yeah, some people get a higher wage, other people get fired.
Right. Yeah, they get the higher wage because it's on the backs of the other people that got fired. Yeah.
That's right.
And you get a thing like you had mentioned this happening in California not too long ago. California doing a similar thing, and all of a sudden apartments being converted into condominiums, and people complaining the apartments are disappearing in place of the condominiums. Why? Because the condominiums didn't come with a cap on the rental.
Imagine that. People respond to incentives. Film at 11. But speaking of incentives, and that's probably the best word to use as a segue into what we're going to talk about today, because I want to talk about the unmitigated shit show that is Iran right now. And I'm going to guess that you're going to look at me and say, what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. You proposed this, and I haven't been paying attention to what's going on.
Well, it's not you. And this is the interesting part. It's the media. There are 28 provinces in Iran. 27 of them right now are rioting.
Really?
This regime is about to topple. The descendant of the Shah of Iran is waiting to be airlifted back in. That's where we are in Iran right now.
Huh.
And the Western media is not reporting on it. And there can be only one reason for this. The Western media, and I'm looking especially at the European media right now, but the American media, not too far behind. Everybody is so ridiculously worried about offending Islamists that they won't report on a nominally Islamic country throwing over a theocracy, because that just doesn't comport with the narrative. I did some digging on this the other day, fascinated by what I wasn't seeing. And I learned that only 40% of Iranians refer to themselves as religious at all.
Really? Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, and I have a very strong suspicion that it is, if that's the case, then an Islamist government will require all of the 40 to be fervently Islamic. And they're not, right? The 40% are just the ones who believe in God, right? And the rest of the people just don't really care one way or the other. And I noticed this when I lived in the Middle East. It was one of the first things I really did notice when I was there. I ran into a lot of Iranians in my travels, and none of them cared at all about an Islamic government. And that flew in the face of everything I thought I was going to see, right? And when you dig into these things a little bit, you realize that a theocracy always appears strongest right before it fails, right?
I've heard you say that before. Could you?
It's the last gasp. It's the last gasp of a regime, right? The last gasp is always to tighten everything up, right? We're losing control, kill a bunch of people, tighten it up, make everybody miserable, and they'll fall into line, right? The beatings will continue until morale improves, this kind of thinking. And when I looked at Iran at the time, the median age in Iran was about 34. Very young country. It's up a little bit at this point. It's rising. So they are aging. And when you get demographic aging like that, definitionally, you're going to get a little more conservative as you go, right? Because the older people are, the more conservative they tend to get. Why? Well, because they have things to lose. It's not because of any internal disposition. It's because, all right, I've managed this. Let's not screw it all up.
Right.
But the people have taken to the streets in Iran. They are looking for regime change. And the riots and the protests are growing every day. I reviewed some films that were, beamed out. The Iranians, the regime, I guess, see, this is what you have to do, right? We're not talking about the Iranians. We're talking about the Iranian ruling class, the regime. The regime shut down internet access for the entire country yesterday.
Wow.
If that happens, or more appropriately, when that happens, they know they're in real trouble.
Right.
Because the last thing they want now is for anybody to hear anything from anyone. And this regime is walking a tightrope that's about the size of a thread. I don't think we'll see, I don't think by summer, maybe a lot sooner, but I think the Iranian regime that we now understand to exist will no longer.
Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions. First is, they shut down the internet. Do you know, is it still down?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how people are getting information out, but they are.
How is the media not reporting on this?
Good question. I'm disgusted by it.
There's
The
only
BBC,
one other country on the planet I know of that does this, and that's North Korea.
North Korea, that's right. The BBC, I went to the BBC's website today. Not a single story on this. Not a single story.
So how did you find out all this?
I have my ways. I have sources everywhere. People tell me things. I get pointed to certain things to go look at. And I can tell you, these riots are the real deal. There are people in the streets by the tens of thousands in Tehran right now, as we speak.
James and I are delighted to be working with Civil. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. Civil's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what James and I have been talking about for years. Civil helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating these to our listeners in ways that we hope they find enjoyable. To see Civil's extensive list of content, including our podcast, Words and Numbers, and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. All right, I got to push you further because our listeners are going to want me to. How can you know this and major news outlets not?
Oh, they know. They're choosing not to cover this. They know. Of course they know. But what do you hear out of Great Britain? All you ever hear at this point is that if you make a comment online on social media, for example, that's critical of Islam in any way, shape, or form, you're likely to be arrested. Well, you think the BBC is going to report on this? the Islamic people in Iran don't want an Islamic government anymore.
I'm seeing some confirmation of this. This is from some Iranian site, Iran Insight. A nationwide internet outage has gripped Iran, according to London-based internet monitoring group NetBlocks. That's something one could follow up if one wanted to.
Yeah, no, you can find this stuff. It's readily available, but you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. We usually say, well, I'll scan the headlines, I'll watch the evening news, it'll come to me. But it's not coming to you. And it's not coming to you because the media is rigged. And it's been rigged for a long time, and we've said it for a long time. So this shouldn't be surprising to anyone. It's disgusting. Not surprising.
As an economist, I got to push back a little bit because the media outlets compete for viewers. It seems odd to me that they would all get together on a topic like this when all it takes is for one of them to break ranks and get far more viewers than anybody else.
My immediate answer to that is that the Western media engages in groupthink to such a degree that they don't even see this as an issue. They all see the world the same way. I'm just guessing that you could go to nationalreview.com right now and find an article about the uprising in Iran.
Yeah,
I'm just guessing.
I just looked Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal's carrying it.
Shocking, right? So now it's going to be a right-wing issue. But I'll tell you something else that I saw that I kind of predicted but worried wouldn't happen. I've been seeing Iranians, regular run-of-the-mill, decent human being Iranians, tweeting, saying, we look forward to the day soon when Israel will be our ally. We don't hate Israel. Our government hates Israel.
Wow. Boy, does that throw a wrench in the works in the Middle East.
The stakes are remarkably high.
Yeah.
And this could be an utter game changer.
Yeah.
Not the least of which for the Iranian people who have suffered this nonsense since 1979.
Right.
Right. So this is a long time. You and I were children when Ayatollah Khomeini took over.
Yep.
And here we are all these years later.
And I don't know anything about the Shah or his policies or any of that. The only thing I can tell you for certain, and I've seen the pictures of downtown Tehran in 1978 and downtown Tehran today. And you look at 1978, and you would not know that wasn't the United States.
No,
picture
that's right.
taken in New York City, for example.
And just to put a finer spin on this, in 1977, 78, you could walk around in Tehran and see young women wearing skirts on their way to school. Now, and I want you to really think about this for a second, Iranian women aren't permitted to show their hair, and in some cases aren't permitted to leave the house. Well, maybe this is a regime whose time has passed. I certainly hope it is. I met a lot of people in the Middle East, and I liked almost every one of them. They're just like people everywhere else. But the crackpots, right? It's always the psychopaths who find their way to the corridors of power. And when they do psychopathic things. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing psychopathic things in Iran for a very long time. And now, as people march around in Iran, mobilizing and demonstrating, they're not chanting death to America or death to Israel. They're chanting death to their own political leaders. I watched a video yesterday. It was a hard video to watch, and those of us in the United States probably have an immediate reaction to it because it's very similar in a way to something we've all seen in the last couple of days. But I watched a group of armed dissidents kill a police captain, right? So now the police know that they're not off limits.
Yep.
And how are they reacting? I've seen video of them firing shotguns into crowds of people, just mowing them down. But as more police die, and they will, And as more police beyond that say, it isn't worth it for me to keep this job, the power will collapse. The power structure will collapse. And I like Iran's chances, actually. They've got something that they can point to in the past that they want to get back to, and they can combine that with some sort of meaningful representative legislature, and they could be a functional place very, very quickly. And, the comparison right now is between Venezuela and Iran. Venezuela will not be a functional place for the foreseeable future. It's probably going to be 20, 30 years before any fruits come to ripeness there. In Iran, it could be working really well in a year. And I'm interested to see where this all leads.
People think about Iran as a developing country, and they forget that thousands of years ago, Iraq was the center of civilization. They had the universities, they had the libraries, they had the culture when Europeans were still living in caves and huts.
Right. When Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Middle East was where you wanted to be if you were an educated man.
Yeah.
And that really changed. I'm not going to get into the intervening variable. I think it's obvious enough to anybody with eyes and a brain. But, Ant, there's a bigger problem here. And I know that what could be a bigger problem than regime change? But Iran is running out of water, literally running out.
Really?
There's a gigantic aquifer, or let me be more precise, there was a gigantic aquifer underneath Tehran, which they were bringing up most of the water. And the aquifer ran dry. And in what I call a fit of Middle Eastern science, they drilled down through the aquifer to find another aquifer and collapsed the aquifer.
Ooh.
So now they have no water and no aquifer to refill over time. It's not raining. The rainy season should be right about now. And in a couple of months, it's going to be 115 degrees all over the Middle East. And you know how this works with water. It disappears. And rational projections hold that Iran will literally run out of water in 2027 or so.
Wow.
And what the hell are they going to do then?
Yeah.
It's already too late to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
The catastrophe is predictable. Everybody knows it's coming. But what do you do about it? My first reaction was, I guess you better start building desalination plants right now.
Right.
And it turns out, well, first, the only people who could do that in that region are the Israelis. Problem there. And there's literally no way to build enough of them to service the population that they have. So we're likely to see a catastrophe of, dare I say it, biblical proportions in Iran in the not too distant future. And that presupposes that they get their political act together prior to that. It'll still happen.
You can't start addressing that problem until you address the political problem.
Until you knock out the first one. So, I mean, my heart goes out to the Iranians right now. They've got a world of trouble in their immediate horizon. And I'm not sure all of their problems can be solved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of them can be, but if you don't have water, you're doomed. And where are those people going to go? They're Persians, not Arabs. They're not going to be absorbed into Arab countries in the Middle East. The Kurds will have a place to go, but the Persians will not. And I worry about that. I worry about that in a profound way. So, now we wait. But the seed time of regime changes right now. And the world can't be rid of that regime fast enough. And take a step back and take a look at the position that Russia now finds itself in. Syria collapsed. Venezuela toppled. Iran about to collapse. Who do the Russians have left? Oh, yeah, they've got this little Ukrainian conflict that they haven't been able to settle up for 3 or 4 years now. Remember when they said it was going to take 3 days?
Right.
Yeah. Well, it didn't. And Putin is beating his shoe on the table harder every day, which leads me to believe he's very scared right now. They're out of options. If the Chinese turn their backs on the Russians, they're screwed. So this is where we find ourselves geopolitically at this moment in time. It's an interesting time to be alive. I don't know if you know this, but the Venezuelans were shipping out oil under other nations' flags, and the United States the Coast Guard boarded 2 ships and took control of them. A third ship didn't allow itself to be boarded and was heading all the way from Venezuela to Russia. And the United States chased it down, boarded it, and took it. The Russians are out on an island all of a sudden. And this Iran business just makes it worse.
I mean, on the one hand, you want the Ukraine business to come to an end. On the other, I don't know how wise it is to back Russia into a corner.
Well, they keep threatening to use nuclear weapons. I don't think they will, but they might. But if you allow Russia at this point in time right now to grab Ukrainian territory and say, this is ours now, and the international community rallies around the new deal that just got brokered, you've just taught everybody that they can invade anywhere they want, and as long as they can hold it long enough and cause enough bloodshed, they'll be able to keep it. Right. And that's not a lesson you want out into the wild either.
Well, you think we would have learned that lesson back in the mid-1900s?
You would think a lot of things right now. And yet, here we are. So I've got, I guess, maybe equal parts hope and trepidation for the Iranians in their present situation. And I hope it comes to a relatively peaceful end quickly. I don't think it's gonna, not quickly and not peaceful. These are relative terms, right? So how quick and how much bloodshed? Because there's always bloodshed at times like this. There's already been some, there will be more. Where it ends is anybody's guess. But right now, if I were a betting man, and I kind of am, I would be betting on the Iranian people and against the regime.
At Words and Numbers, we spent a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government. But fundamentally, this all boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect. The people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately to engage civilly with each other. If you share our vision, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.